Alright, good morning everyone. We got another fantastic lecture for you guys today. Anyone else seen WandaVision? I have not. Yeah, I don't. I don't subscribe to Disney Plus. So today we're going to be talking about a couple different related topics. In general, the theme is the way things are versus the way things should be. And we will get into our first social issue and computer science question today. Yep. So, let's see, we're recording. We got people on Discord. All right, let's do this. So the first and probably the most important thing for you guys to understand is something called the is-ought problem. This is postulated by a philosopher by the name of David Hume back in the day, a couple hundred years ago. And he said that there's no logical connection between the way things are and the way that things should be. So we have what are called empirical statements, like in science. You make an observation, and you say that, all these ants that I observe have 6 legs, and you observe spiders and discover that spiders have 8 legs. That would be an empirical observation. You're just describing the way the world is. Okay. You go outside, you look at a tree. Tree's got leaves on it. Okay. Tree's got leaves, And so that's an is statement, right? How is the world? What's it like? Make an observation. The way that science works is you make a bunch of observations and draw, you make sort of a general model of how the world works from it. You splash water, then a wave will come out. That's the way that the world is. Now, the problem is that there's another kind of statement, and that's called a normative statement. A normative statement is a statement about the way the world should be. For example, questions of morality. You should not murder. You should not steal. You should not teach a class if you haven't had your coffee. Right? Those are normative statements. Those are ought statements, the way things ought to be. And the problem is that people confuse these two things all the time, and there's no logical connection between the two. It's kind of a logical fallacy, right? So if you say that the teachers, teachers should drink coffee before teaching a class because all the teachers I had drank coffee before class. There's a problem there, which is that it's a logical fallacy. Okay. Scientific method, yeah, exactly. So the scientific method is about observing the world and generating a model, a general model of how the world works, more or less. And we'll probably have a lecture on the scientific method at some point in this class. It is a complicated topic, actually. But you can't do that. The way that just because the way the world is doesn't mean it should be that way, right? Like sometimes there are things that should change, right? There's probably things in the world right now that exist that probably you wish shouldn't be. Maybe coronavirus, right? Just because coronavirus exists in the world right now doesn't mean that it should exist. You know what I mean? Like, can you guys think of any other examples? Good morning, William. Can you guys think of any other examples of things that exist right now that maybe you think should not exist? War? Okay. Yeah. It's fairly early. The Houston Rockets. The United States debt. Does it exist? Does debt exist? I don't know. I mean, we all agree it exists. Nuclear bombs, diabetes, taxes, college. Nice. Exams, pay-to-play games, yeah. Yeah. Any pay-to-win game, I think, should not exist. My dad actually had that idea back in the 90s. He wanted to make a game in which it was free, but you could buy better bullets, you know, so it'd be like a first-person shooter, but if you paid $1 a bullet, it would do double damage or something. I was like, Dad, it's evil. I'm not going to do that. And then, of course, you know, the whole mobile free-to-play, pay-to-win industry developed out of that. But World of Tanks, yeah. Ethnic discrimination, racism, yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting question about that, which is student debt for sure. Does debt exist? I don't know. Can you observe your debt? Can you poke your debt with a stick? Does it exist? It's an interesting question. What do you guys think? I mean, we all agree it exists. So does that make it exist? Do you guys believe in the consensus theory of truth? The 49ers. Right, and so, you know, like I said, these concepts of truth, like, they come up all the time, right? And so we collectively agree that you owe money to somebody if you have a student debt, then I guess you do, you know? Can't touch it, can't lick it, can't smell it, can't hear it, but we all agree that there's some number that you owe some other person or some organization, so I guess you do, yeah. If it affects you, it's real. All right, that's a pragmatic response, right? You know, just like how if you jump off a building, you'll die. You know, if you don't pay your student debt, they're going to come and take your education back. That's just how it works. You know, you just reach into your mind and pull all knowledge of CSI 1 out of your head if you can't pay for it. I can't lick my debt, it's not real. That's going to be my court argument. Yeah, it's I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Like, you know, we just all kind of agree that it's real, you know. I'm not saying it's not. I just think it's interesting. Right? So ethnic discrimination, aka racism. So that's an interesting question also. So ethnicity is about kind of your country of origin, right? And race is a really interesting question. So so race is like, I actually don't like the word. I mean, you have to use it because, you know, you talk about racism, right? Like, there's, you know, that's the word, you know, for, you know, what a lot of things are. But like the notion that there are human races is itself a racist concept, you know. But because everyone pretends it's real, just like your student debt, it's real even though it's not real, you know. It's a really interesting thing. So and it relates to what we're talking today. So we'll do a couple minutes on it, I guess. So ethnicity refers to your country of origin, right? Like Latino or Hispanic is the ethnic question that you'll get on surveys, right? Are you Latino or non-Latino? Or Hispanic. Hispanic or Latino is usually the way it's checked. And so you can be, for example, white and Latino, or you be black and Latino. right? There's a lot of Afro-Cuban music and things like that in the Caribbean. It has to do with do your ancestors come from countries with people whose origin is from Spain, basically. Although Latin should be Italy, right? Like if it's Latin, it should be Italy. I don't know. But so in the 1800s, there was these kind of quasi-scientific, talking about what we're talking about today, studies on the different races of mankind. And so there were, 5 races these people came up with. And there was the white race, and the black race, and the yellow race, and the red race, right? And the brown race. And it's just completely, I mean, it wasn't scientific at all. It was just sort of a way of categorizing people in a way that, these racists could like sort of denigrate large groups of people, and of course, according to the people who made this, quasi-scientific, pseudoscientific categorization, white was the best, right? And what was interesting was that like people that we would consider white today, like Italians, right, were not considered white; they're considered brown, right? Irish were not considered white. Basically, the original conception of white was people from England, basically French, I guess. And then over time, because these things aren't scientific, they're just really broad, non-scientific categories. Who's in what category has changed over time. And so, like for example, you can now have, like one issue that's coming up now is some people are recategorizing Asians as white people, right? And that's something that's going on right now. If you look at 100 years ago, Jewish people were not considered white. Hispanic people are considered white, and so these categories are fluid and they change, and it's a weird thing because we all take it's very serious business, right? Like it's very serious business what race you are, but at the same time it's utterly non-scientific and sort of just arbitrary who's in what category. And honestly, I think there's just one human race, the human race. You know what I mean? But as long as people treat people differently based on the race, then it's kind of real. It's like your student debt, right? Like if people agree that it's real, then I guess it's real. If you're into the consensus theory of truth or the pragmatic theory of truth, right? If people are treated differently based on the race, and if you go back not 100 years, but if you go back 60 years, then there were things like some guy tried to fight for the label of Caucasian because he came from the Caucasus Mountains and lost. Interestingly enough, like Iranian people, like from that area, are considered white, and so in the UC system, there's a movement right now to create a new category called Middle East and North Africa, MENA, M-E-N-A, because they're considered white, and they think that it's erasing their identity, more or less. And so they're fighting to not be white, which is interesting. And so like I said, if you're into the consensus theory of truth or the pragmatic theory of truth, then if everybody pretends your student debt is real, it's real. If everybody, and maybe it is, I don't know. Like I'm not putting my flag down on anything in this class, but race is the same way. Like there's scientifically speaking, there's really there's one human race. If you look at what the term means when applied to dogs and things like that, that's there's one human race. But as long as people pretend there's 5 different races, then I guess there are, if you're into the consensus theory of truth. So it is, but should it be, right, is ought. That's how people treat other people right now. Should it be? I don't know. I'd probably I'd probably put my flag down on that one and say, yeah, racism's probably a bad thing. I'll put my foot down on that one. But yeah, it's a weird thing, because we're still using these concepts, made by a racist that has no basis in scientific reality, and I'm taking a class right now on this kind of stuff, and they wouldn't even let you check nothing, right? Like, you have to pick one of the 5 categories, and I'm like, really, like, we're taking a class on racism, and I don't know, it was interesting. It was interesting. So, yeah, but that definition wise, race is from this notion of the 5 colors of humanity, and ethnicity is country of origin. And so, so like if you go back 60 years, there's this concept called redlining, where banks would color different neighborhoods of Fresno. Like, you can find a redlining. You never knew there was a class on racism. It's only for computer science professors, actually. Yeah, it's run by Duke University. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's more than just racism. It's about really the kind of stuff we're taking in this class, right? Social issues of computer science. Kind of broadly speaking, which we haven't done much of in this class. We're going to start getting into it. And so, like, so the notion of redlining was 60 years ago. If you tried to apply for a loan and you were in a neighborhood that was red, which is the low category of a neighborhood. Let's see if we can find a map of this. Redlining Fresno. Oh, there you go. And so here's what's that, downtown Fresno, I guess. Yeah. And so points of interest in and near Fresno. Fresno is in the exact geographical center of California. It's one of the most conveniently located convention cities of the state. So what is there to see in Fresno? We have a practical monopoly on raisins, grapes, and figs. There's 4 high schools and 21 elementary schools. Roding Park has 800 varieties of trees and shrubs. Kearney Boulevard. Exciting stuff. When was this made? Is there copyright on this? Yeah, and so you can see here, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. And so the lowest grade of a neighborhood is red, right? And so it would be hard to get a loan if you were in a red-lined neighborhood. And that's where the term comes from. And as it just so happens, these were areas where a lot of minorities lived, right? And so caused disparities in housing, right? Even if you had the money for a house, you couldn't get one. And so as the result of these policies,
I got
what's up,
first place. We're doing Kahoot, and I got first place for fractions.
Well, that's pretty awesome, girl. Good job. So in 1960, National Housing, let's see, Fair Housing Act. It's like 60s, I believe. 68. There you go. Yeah, and so in the 1960s, this process was made illegal. Okay. I wish my parents were that proud of me. Yeah. That's the story. Yeah, so prohibits discrimination by direct providers of housing, such as landlords and real estate companies. It is illegal to make housing unavailable to people because of race or color, religion, sex, national origin, right? Ethnicity is different from race and color, right? Familial status or disability. Okay, and so, which is interesting, familial status. That means, you can't prohibit somebody, like an unmarried woman, like that used to be a thing, like they wouldn't rent to unmarried women, which was a problem. Like if a woman wanted to go to college, they would oftentimes have trouble, having a place to stay, and so they'd have to, it presented kind of a barrier to college back in the day. Or if you have kids, like they can't not rent to you because you have a family, right? And so one of the central objectives was prohibiting race discrimination. Yeah, the one of my friends who's, how old would she be now? About 80 now, I guess. So I know her about 20 years ago when she was in her 60s. Yeah, that sounds about right. She moved to Phoenix, Arizona, in the 1960s, and they tried buying a house, and the neighborhoods were entailed. And so when you entail a house, what happens is there's a contract. And so you buy the house, and the contract says you can't be black to buy this house. And when you sell it, you have to include this contract on the person you sell it to. And so it's like this perpetual contract. So if you sell it, then they have to agree to entail the property as well. And when they sell it, it's entailed. And so it can't ever be sold to a black family. And so that was the thing that was done, back in the day. And so when a developer would come into a neighborhood, make all these houses, all of them would be entailed, so you couldn't sell them to black people, and the neighborhood would be permanently white, right? And so she moved into one of these neighborhoods, and as a black family, and basically this would be around the time that this stuff was made illegal, right? And suffered discrimination, as I don't know, you might imagine, as a result of it. Like as the first black family in this neighborhood, it was not especially welcoming, although it did get better over the years. And Barry Goldwater, who was the presidential candidate for the Republican Party, was a Jew, and he was a senator from Arizona. Yeah, there you go. Republican presidential nominee in 1964. So Barry Goldwater was Jewish. He was the first candidate of ethnic Jewish heritage to be nominated for president. And so a lot of people don't know this. Like, Republicans ran a person with ethnic Jewish background for president in the 60s, right? Which, yeah. And so he was living in Arizona and living in Phoenix, I believe. And there was a country club. He's obviously wealthy. There's a wing in the Heard Museum in Phoenix that he donated all the stuff to. Like, the dude was pretty well off. And Kachina dolls. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, look at that. His doll collection included 437 items, and yeah, I've seen that. That's cool. Anyway, and so the local country club wouldn't allow him in because his dad was Jewish. And so after he became senator and then presidential candidate, they sent him a letter saying that, all right, you can come to the country club now. And what was his quote? Country club. Let's see. Goldwater Women's Tennis Classic to be held at the Phoenix Country Club in Phoenix. Is that the one that discriminated against him? I don't know. I can't remember what his quote was, but it was pretty good. It was something like, "I wouldn't want to be a member of." That's right. He wanted to play golf at a restricted Phoenix Country Club. They apologized as a senator for not allowing him to play. Whereas he said, "Well, that's all right. I only wanted to play 9 holes." Because he's half Jewish, right? So rather than playing all 18 holes of golf, he said, "That's all right. I only wanted to play 9 holes because he's half Jewish." So, yeah. It was a very witty statement that he made as a result of it. And anyway, so all this kind of stuff has been banned since the 1960s. And so, does it still happen? Yeah. And so if you if you look at the press room, cases and matters. Here we go. Yeah. So you can see housing and civil enforcement cases, and race or color. And so these are all of the cases where the federal government has won a discrimination lawsuit against landlords that were discriminated against people based on their race or color. You can see there's a fair number of them, right? So, yeah, the way that things is, the way they be, it's not the way they necessarily should be, right? Fair Housing Act doesn't talk about not being able to evict because of sexuality. Yeah, I mean, it was written in the 60s, right? The equal, I think it's been amended since then. I could be wrong. Yeah. It do be like that sometimes, theory. Yeah. So, yeah, you guys understand? So, there's a disconnect between the way that things are and the way that things should be. And so this presents a problem for people who want to use science to determine ethics, right? So people like Sam Harris, they believe you can use science to determine right and wrong, you know, and just by doing science, you can determine right and wrong. And it doesn't work. Right, like just by saying, yeah, well, racism exists, therefore racism is the way things should be. Like, you know, that's not. There's a disconnect, right? And so Sam Harris sort of sneaks under the covers utilitarianism. So what he says is, if we can agree that bodily health is good and you know, physical pain is bad, then we can use science to determine what's right and wrong. It's like, okay, so you're just a utilitarian, but you're pretending it's all science. Okay, got it. So, yeah, and like you can see, a lot of people don't agree with utilitarianism. A lot of people do, and if you're utilitarianism, it's great. Then you can use the philosophic calculus to determine what's right and wrong. But yeah, that's yeah, okay. All right, so, you know, how do you move from science to ethics, right? Because obviously we make observations about the world. Like, you know, you looked at the redlining map of Fresno, and to a certain extent, did I close it already? I did close it already. You know, and to a certain extent, the ethnic breakdown of Fresno still follows the redlining maps drawn up, you know, 60 or 80 years ago, whenever that was. And you know, most people would look at that and be like, you know, that doesn't seem right to me. You know, I don't think that people should be discriminated against by their race. You know, but you know, the question is, how do you do that? Like, how do you move from an observation of, especially if you're back in the 1960s, there's all sorts of things you can complain about. Nowadays, like I said, like it's illegal, and so it's mostly just a matter of enforcement these days, right? But how do you do that? I'm asking you guys. I'm not making a rhetorical question. I'm actually asking you, like, how do you move from an observation of the world to determining if it should change or not, or if it's okay for it to be that way? How do you guys do it? Dead silence on Discord. Okay. Empathy. Okay. All right. Empathy. So, recognizing the fellow humanity of your humans. You know, I could see that for cases with humans, but what about you know, situations not involving humans, like forest fires or something like that, right? You know, you could say, well, forest fires are a natural part of the world, therefore we should not stop forest fires from coming down, right? There's no real empathy on either side there, unless humans are going to be impacted, which, for the sake of argument, let's say they're not, right? And so if somebody says forest fires are a natural part of the natural world, you know, sequoias and pine trees require fire to release their seeds and things like that. Therefore, we should not interfere with forest fires. That's an Aesop issue, right? So how do you justify that? How do you make that move? What argument do you make? Sometimes the fire wasn't started by nature itself. It's true. It's true. But like, a lot of times it is. Lightning sometimes caused by PG&E. Right. One of the biggest fires was it last year, 2 years ago, was caused by PG&E. Killed some people up in Napa, I believe. Yeah. Allegedly. I mean, the Earth was hit by a meteor. Mother Nature turned out okay. Yeah, therefore, we shouldn't stop a meteor from hitting the Earth, right? It's all part of circle of life. How do you make that move? How do you justify interfering with nature, right? Or not interfering with nature? Either way. Can you even stop it? Yeah, I saw a documentary on it. The documentary was called Armageddon. It's a 1998 movie with Bruce Willis. A bunch of oil drillers are trained as astronauts somehow, because it's easier to train an oil driller as an astronaut than an astronaut as an oil driller. And they fly up to an asteroid that's going to hit the Earth and put a nuclear bomb in it and blow it up. My first exposure to Aerosmith. Yeah, was it I Don't Want to Miss a Thing or whatever. Yeah. Will there be another one in the future? Probably. I mean, Earth gets hit by meteors all the time. Most of them burn up, right? Fires can burn out of control and ruin livelihoods. Plus, it ruins the beauty of forests. So we want to protect it by not using this land. So, okay, so that would be kind of a consequentialist outlook. So because fires can burn out of control and ruin livelihoods, we should stop them. Or you can argue maybe we should let them burn because then they're less likely to burn out of control later. I don't know. We've pushed nature for our own benefit ethically because it would help mankind grow. Yeah, okay. So, so we should interfere in nature because if you cut down a forest and put up a field, then you can support more humans, right? That's certainly an argument. I'm more worried about a star going supernova and radiating us. Our star or like some other star? If it's another star, it's probably not going to do very much. Other stars are pretty far away. So there's an inverse square law. It's like, when you have a light bulb, further away you get from it, the dimmer the light gets. Other stars are, far away. Okay, so, and so basically the answer is you need to have some sort of moral framework, right? Like we were talking about. Like you have to have some sort of framework, like a utilitarian outlook or a consequentialist outlooks are, very easy to bridge from is to ought, right? Well, which will support more human life, which will, so, in general though, it's considered a fallacy, and that's called the naturalistic fallacy. The naturalistic fallacy is the notion that the way things are the way things should be, right? So it is natural for X, therefore we should do it, right? Very popular in society, very popular in marketing, right? This is made up of all natural ingredients. I'm buying a car, dude. I don't need it to be all natural. You know what I mean? Like, this bag here is made 100% of natural ingredients. There are no artificial ingredients in this bag. Okay, cool. You know, have you guys ever seen that before in marketing? Like they'll, you know, it's like, you guys know what I'm talking about? Like when you buy something, they'll advertise that it's all natural, no artificial, you know, stuff in it. I'm buying a book, dude. I'm not eating a granola bar. You know what I mean? Organic, yeah. Yeah, organic's one of those terms that kind of doesn't mean anything, but there are some organizations that will sort of enforce organicness on things. A friend of mine's a farmer, and he has an organic farm, and so he has to comply with certain rules, no pesticides and stuff like that. It's made of 100% pure baby horsehair. Yeah. It says real fruit juice with the first ingredients artificial flavors. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is made with real fruit juice. Yeah, there's a drop of it in the entire barrel, right? It's like homeopathic fruit juice, you know? Like made with 1% fruit juice. Real fruit power. Hawaiian punch. Made with 1% fruit juice. Right? And so, very common. There's an appeal for nature. There's a, you know, people like nature. People like trees and hiking and stuff like that. And I do too, you know. So it's a very common approach in marketing to market nature as if it was inherently good. But you know what else is natural? Cyanide, right? Rattlesnake venom is natural, you know, like, but you don't see, you know, me being like, oh, let me get some rattlesnake venom up in my Hawaiian punch, you know what I mean? I've actually got a jar. A friend of mine went to Okinawa and brought back snake wine. Okinawa. Yeah, it basically looks like that. So I'm like, cool, thank you. Yeah, awesome. Sitting on my daughter's bookshelf with all of her kids' books. There's like this dead snake and alcohol on top of it. It's one way of keeping your kids from getting into your alcohol closet. Let's put it that way. She grows up to be a teenager. Her friends are like, let's break into your parents' alcohol cabinet. And there's just this snake there. Yeah, kids, if you want to drink that, like, you know, you deserve to get drunk. That's all I can say. Is that the thing with the snake in the bottle? Yeah. Yeah, it's totally organic, right? Like, there you go. It's natural. It must be healthy, right? Right, and so the naturalistic fallacy is very common. For example, in the debate over homosexuality and gay rights and things like that, a lot of Christians are saying it's unnatural to be homosexual, and then gay rights activists said, no, look at nature. Lots of, you know, if you look at every animal species except pigs, they have homosexuality in them. But both of those arguments are fallacious, right? Because that's the naturalistic fallacy. It doesn't matter if it's natural or not, you know? It's natural for all sorts of horrible things, you know? Like there's insects that like leave another insect alive and then like implant their eggs into it, you know? Like there's a lot of horrible stuff that happens in nature, you know? There's all you know, that we wouldn't want to do, you know? And to a certain extent, you know, part of being human and having empathy and things like that is not doing what's natural, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you get mad, you murder somebody. No, don't do that. But it's natural, Your Honor. Yeah. Right? Infanticide, child abandonment, sure. Yeah, practiced in a lot of societies, right? Like I said, the Romans considered people to be barbarians if they didn't commit infanticide, right? And so the naturalistic fallacy, which is very commonly used, right? Like it's you know, you should do rock climbing because it'll put you in contact with nature, or that's more, yeah. It's not like yeah. It's not exactly the naturalistic fallacy, but you know, it's natural for people to be racist. Therefore, you should be racist. No, like, the whole point of being a human is to rise above our nature, you know. So, yeah, marketing people love it. Politicians love it. It's a very common fallacy, and it's based on confusing is and ought. The way things are, it's the way things should be. Just because some wasps inject their eggs into a living insect for the young to burrow out from their still writhing bodies doesn't mean we should do it. You know what I mean? So, right, and so that's very common. And then there's a related notion, which is a cognitive bias. A Rick and Morty insect. No, actually, this is just science. But yeah, the I believe Rick and Morty talk about that. Yeah. If the parent dies, and that's how I got away with murder. Yeah. Bears can murder, but I can't. Come on, Your Honor, bear with me here. I have the right to bear arms, right? It's in the Constitution. I can have bear arms, right? It's right there. If bears can murder people with their arms, so can I. How can that possibly be misconstrued? There you go. I have the right to bear arms.
I got first place again, but this
Twice
time,
in a row, girl.
This
Nice.
time it was on Dr. Seuss.
Ada, look. Ada. Did you know that in America we have the right to bear arms?
Okay.
Okay. She said, okay. There you go. Right. And so in politics, this is very, very powerful. Status quo bias. And so, equivocation, yeah. Very good. The status quo. Whatever is currently, there's usually a bias for it. So cognitive bias is kind of related to logical fallacies, but they're a little bit different. The human brain takes shortcuts, right? All the time. It's the only way that we can navigate in a big, complicated world. Cognitive biases are everywhere, and they're basically shortcuts. And so status quo bias is we have a natural preference for the world staying the same. Okay, because we're familiar with it, we know how it works. And so, for example, part of the reason why I think that the Uber proposition passed this last election cycle was because it was going to change how Uber and Lyft worked and Doordash worked. And people know how it works right now, and we're fine with it. And so the AB5, which was a California Senate Assembly bill, sorry, it's AB 5, our California legislature changed how Uber would work so that they would go from being 1099 contractors to being W-2 employees. And that was going to radically change, because then you'd have to like work a shift, when you're an Uber driver, which is usually not what you want to do, right? I mean, I guess, but it's a very different model for Uber and Lyft and Doordash. And even though California is a very blue state, the AB5 was rejected by proposition 55 to 45 by 10-point margin. Such a confusing vote. They worded it very weirdly. Yeah, these things can be, but there's a lot of advertising over it, and even though we're in a very blue state, it passed by a 10-point margin. And and my non-expert opinion on it is because it's status quo. Like, people know how Uber works and kind of want to keep it the same. It'd be a very different thing if you had to go to work at Uber at 10 o'clock in the morning and work until 6 p.m. Whereas right now you can just get in your car, do a couple gigs, my friend delivers groceries. If he's going someplace, he'll just see if there's any gigs in that direction, and he'll go to Vaughn's and pick up some groceries and drop them off and make $10 as he travels across town. And when he's coming back, he'll do the same thing. You know, you can't do that if you're a W-2 employee. So, so yeah, status quo bias is very powerful. You know, people tend to want things to not change. That's yeah, it's a stronger impulse in conservatives than it is in liberals, because again, conservatism is essentially about not wanting things to change, or not wanting things to change quickly, or not wanting things to change without good reason. G.K. Chesterton once said that if you see a fence in a forest, don't tear it down until you understand why it was built. If you see a fence in the forest, don't tear it down until you understand why they built it there in the first place. Right? That's the conservative ethic in a nutshell. Right? And so the criticism of conservatives, they change too slowly. The criticism of progressives and liberals is that they change too quickly. Right? Just because you change something doesn't mean it's going to get better. Right? Things can change for the worse. And so it's, you know, usually if you see a problem, you want it to change, cool. But, you know, make sure you're not gonna make it worse, right? So, finally, this is what your homework assignment's going to be on: descriptivism and prescriptivism. So, prescriptivism is a ought. This is how language should work. If you guys have ever gone to an English class and your English teacher marked you down for not using words no good, then that's prescriptivism. No, you're wrong. You failed to conjugate the word properly. If you're in an English class and you lose a point because you used the wrong particle, that's prescriptivism. There are rules for a language and people have to follow them. Descriptivism is. Okay? It's the is side of the is-ought problem. So descriptivism is language should reflect how people use it rather than how experts. Prescriptivism is experts, you know. You get a dictionary, here's what the word means. Descriptivism is the notion of language, words mean things based on how people use them. And so language is very fluid, it changes all the time. We just have to pay attention to how people are using words, and that's what they mean. Whereas prescriptivism is, if you're a prescriptivist, you'd be like, no, you're using it wrong. That's not what the word means, right? And so these are two different schools of thought, and I think most people are somewhere in the middle between them. You know, it's kind of a spectrum, right? So kind of like slangs. Yeah, slangs are an excellent example of descriptivistic thinking. You just make a new word up, and people adopt it, and you know, and then a prescriptivist would say, you know, after slang has been used for long enough, and it sort of enters the common vernacular, and experts recognize it, and it gets added to the dictionary, then it's proper to use it, right? Whereas a descriptivist is just like, yeah, just pay attention to how people are using words, and that's it. And so in France, for example, France is a prescriptivist country. There's an organization called the Académie Française, the Académie Française, that is populated by the immortals. It's literally what they're called. The Académie Française. Les Immortels. The immortals. And so these are the people that for almost 400 years have been responsible for defining what is proper French, right? So the Académie Française defines what French is. This is correct French. This is not correct French. You're wrong, right? And so, like, there's a thing going on right now in France, which is their keyboard sucks. So, I don't know. Have you guys ever seen a French keyboard? You guys know, have you ever heard of a Zerti? You guys see how that's different from our QWERTY keywords? Whenever I go to France and try to use like an internet cafe or something, I get very confused. I'm like typing, I'm like, what the hell am I typing? Right? It's mostly the same as our keyboard, right? The E through P are the same. The S, D, F, G, H, J, K, L are the same. The M got moved from here to here. The W and the Z are switched. X, C, V, B, N. Yeah, and so there's just a couple keys that are different, enough to like really annoy you. WASD, right? Yeah. Poor Ubisoft, right? 'Cause they're partly French-based. Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5? So in France, they use the AZERTY keyboard, and that's a different keyboard layout than what we use here in America. We use the QWERTY layout. And so the French have like a C with a little tail on it, right? And so they have a key for that, right? We don't on our keyboards. And they have the accent characters. Do they have the ligatures, the AE? I don't see it on here. And so that's a problem. And so the AZERTY keyboard layout has support for upside down question mark. Like if you've ever studied Spanish, you probably recognize that. But the AZERTY keyboard sucks. The reason why it sucks is because it doesn't actually support things like an accent over a capital letter. So here you have A with the accent grave or whatever, and here's E with the accent, whatever the other one's called. E with the accent going down, E with the accent going up. But no capital E with an accent. And so this has been causing a problem because a lot of French people now think that you cannot have a accent over a capital letter. Why? Because the keyboard doesn't support it. Right? École, which means school. If you were to capitalize the E using the AZERTY keyboard, you couldn't do it with an accent over it. And so a lot of French people these days, coming back to what we're talking about here, a lot of French people these days believe that you can't have an accent over a capital letter simply because the keyboard doesn't support it. And so the France, as a national effort, has redesigned their keyboards. And so they have come out with a new official keyboard layout, Prescriptivism. And I was reading this article, and it's like, they're wrong. These people that think you can't have an accent over a capital letter are wrong. Right? And that's because France is officially a prescriptivist country, right? All these people that think you can't have a capital E école with an accent over it are wrong. And that's prescriptivism. Do you guys understand? And how do you even know this? Because I'm a member of the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, the International Computer Science Association, and that was the cover story. The cover story was how France went about designing a new keyboard, and all the different groups they involved, and how they decided where to put the keys on the keyboard, and all the criteria they used. It was very interesting. And so, it was funny to me because I lecture on descriptivism versus prescriptivism, and it was just like, yeah, that's prescriptivism right there. These people are wrong, and and so they're getting a new keyboard as the result, because they felt like it was hurting the keyboard layout hurts the English, hurts the French language, right? That's literally what it said. Like the AZERTY keyboard layout hurts the French language, and so they're like, we got to change the keyboard layout then, right? Whereas the descriptivist would be like, all right, let's change the French language, right? The French language should change. Let's get rid of these accents, because what do I think? This has the same logic as people who think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. So, yeah, and so this is a very big issue right now. And, and every time you've been in an English class and your English teacher is like, you're wrong, this is incorrect, that's prescriptivism. This is, however, a very, very contentious issue right now. This is probably one of the most politically loaded things right now. Which it doesn't sound like it should be. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't sound like this should be in any way contentious. Like, you could just be like, I'm a descriptivist or I'm a prescriptivist, and who gives a crap, right? Like, I don't know, it's like your ethical theory. Like, nobody really gets mad if you're a utilitarian, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I'm a utilitarian. Oh, okay, cool, you know. I believe in the consensus theory of truth. Okay, that's interesting. You know, this is hugely contentious right now, right? The big thing right now is, what does it mean for somebody to be a man, and what does it mean for somebody to be a woman, right? And if you don't agree with somebody on the definition of those words, it is a big issue, right? There's at least 6 different theories of gender that I've studied, right? And everybody thinks that their theory of gender is the right one. Maybe not everyone, but, you know, and if anybody disagrees with me, they're wrong, you know. What's funny is that those people are oftentimes descriptivists, right? And so, you know, it's a huge issue right now, and even in other areas as well. For example, what does it mean to be an atheist? This is a huge issue right now. What does it mean to be an atheist? How is that contentious? Huh? Right? Yeah, it's very, very contentious right now. What does it mean to be an atheist? And it's the prescriptivists say, well, it's pretty easy to tell what it means to be an atheist, because philosophy, which is philosophy of religion in particular, says that an atheist is somebody who believes that no gods exist. Pretty easy, right? A theist is somebody who believes that one or more gods exist. Technically, a theist is somebody who believes that the proposition one or more gods exist is true. And an atheist is somebody who believes that the proposition one or more gods exist is false. Pretty easy. However, the movement right now is to redefine atheism so that it means anybody who doesn't believe in a god, which sounds almost the same thing, but it's not, right? Like, my book doesn't believe in God, so therefore my book is an atheist. You know what I mean? And so the big thing right now is redefining atheism. So rather than believing that no gods exist, it is not believing in a god. And so it's a much weaker definition. And so that has the effect of making more people into atheists. So there used to be a third category, or maybe there still is, who knows, called agnosticism, where you're not sure if gods exist or not. And so what atheism is trying to do is rebrand itself so that agnostics are also atheists. And so you would go from having 7% of the population to 40% of the population, whatever it is, right? So, and this is political, right? Because the more numbers you have, the more power you have, right? And so this is a very big issue right now in philosophy of religion. Yep. And some people have gone so far as to say, if you're not 100% believing in God, then you're an atheist, right? I have seen people claim that, and that's a very, very radically different definition than what we've used in the past. And they're saying, well, because we all use it this way, it must be correct. So that would be descriptivism. So how definitions change, how definitions are made, very contentious. Very, it's a very hot, and not like hot like, oh, that's so hot, but like you burn yourself hot, issue. So that is it for today. We will pick this back up on Monday, and then we'll probably do our first forum discussion. And I'm not going to give it to you guys now because we kind of need to get into proper conduct and things like that on how to do a forum discussion. We're going to have our first online debate on Monday. Okay. So how will the discussion be done? We're out of time for today. We'll talk about it on Monday. Basically, it'll be on Canvas. And so Canvas has a discussions section. And what you're going to do is you're going to write a short essay, a couple paragraphs, and then people will respond to you. Okay. So that is it for today. And we're getting a TA also. So that's some news right now. Okay. So thank you guys. Are we going to have another quiz based on this stuff? Yeah, I mean, if you want one, sure. Why not? That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. All right. See you guys.